In a dental practice, the problem of one employee's poor performance almost never remains that person's problem alone. Very quickly, it becomes a problem for the entire team. Someone has to finish what was left undone. Someone has to correct the mistake, call the patient, find the missing information, prepare the treatment room, check the documentation, or stay late at work. And in my experience, it is almost always the same people, the most responsible ones. This is where a paradox begins, one that many practice owners notice only when it is already too late. The best employees do not necessarily leave because they have too much work. They often leave because they see that more and more is expected of them precisely because they are good at what they do, while the poor performance of others is tolerated for months or even years. That is one of the fastest ways to lose good people. Imagine a dental practice where one employee is regularly late, forgets agreed responsibilities, leaves tasks unfinished, or avoids responsibility. At first, colleagues help. It may even look like good teamwork. One person finishes what another did not have time to complete. Someone else calls the patient. A third person stays an extra 10 minutes. But what begins as help can very easily become the rule. The most organized person starts checking other people's work. The most responsible person takes on extra tasks. The calmest person resolves conflicts. The practice owner sees that the practice is still functioning and may start to believe that the problem is not really that serious. It is serious. The work is getting done only because someone else is paying the price. Good employees recognize this pattern very quickly. If they perform well, they are given more work. If someone performs poorly, that person gets another chance. If they are reliable, they are expected to help the team. If someone is unreliable, the rest of the team adapts around that person. At some point, the issue stops being about productivity. It becomes an issue of fairness. And a sense of unfairness can destroy a team much faster than a heavy workload. People can accept a difficult day. They can accept a complicated patient, an emergency, a delayed schedule, or a temporary staff shortage. What they find much harder to accept is the feeling that the rules are not the same for everyone. If your best dental assistant arrives on time every day, manages sterilization properly, prepares the treatment room, and solves problems, while someone who is constantly late faces no consequences, she will not only be watching her colleague. She will also be watching you, the practice owner or the head of the department. She will wonder whether you notice what is happening, whether you value her effort, whether someone is finally going to respond. And perhaps most importantly, why should she continue giving her best if minimal effort is obviously enough? This is where practice owners often make a major mistake. They want to keep the peace. They do not want an uncomfortable conversation. They do not want conflict. They hope the employee will recognize the problem on their own. They give a few subtle warnings. They ask others to help out a little. They wait for the right moment. But poor performance rarely disappears because we ignore it. Silence is also a decision. When you fail to respond for months, employees do not only hear what you say. They watch what you allow. That is why you have to speak with an employee who is not meeting expectations. However, that conversation must not become an attack. One of the biggest mistakes is entering the conversation with a verdict already made. He is lazy. She does not care. He has a bad attitude. Maybe. But there may be a completely different problem. Poor performance may be the result of inadequate training, poorly defined responsibilities, lack of experience, poor organization, declining motivation, or a personal problem that is affecting work. That is why you first need to define the facts. Do not tell an employee, "You have a bad attitude toward your work." Say, "Over the past 2 weeks, the treatment room was not fully prepared before the patient arrived on 3 occasions." Those are 2 completely different statements. The first attacks the person. The second describes the problem. When I speak with a team member about a problem, I believe it must be completely clear what happened, what the consequences were, and what is expected in the future. Unclear standards create unclear accountability. An employee needs to know what good performance actually means. Be more responsible is not a standard. The instruments must be prepared before the patient enters the treatment room is a standard. Then comes the part many managers find difficult: stop talking. Listen to the person. You may hear excuses. You may hear something you disagree with. But you may also discover the real cause of the problem. Does the employee lack sufficient knowledge? Did they misunderstand the procedure? Do they have too many responsibilities? Is there a communication problem? Do they need additional training? If you fail to identify the cause, you may spend months trying to fix a symptom. Then ask the employee what they suggest. What do you think needs to change? What exactly will you do differently? What do you need from me? Responsibility for the solution should not rest entirely with the practice owner. One of the bad habits of managers is becoming professional problem solvers for everyone else. An employee brings a problem, and the owner solves it. The next time, the employee does the same thing. After a few months, people stop trying to find solutions themselves. They simply pass the problem upward. A good team does not function that way. Help people with advice, experience, and information, but do not take responsibility away from them. Once you agree on what needs to change, everything must become specific. What needs to be done? Who is responsible? By when? When will the results be reviewed? I'll try harder is not a solution plan. An agreement without a deadline is not a solution either. And one more thing. The conversation is meaningless if you do not follow up on what happens afterward. Many managers have a difficult conversation, feel relieved, and then never return to the issue. Within a few weeks, everything goes back to the way it was. If there is a performance problem, there also has to be a period of monitoring. Some employees will respond extremely well. Sometimes people genuinely needed nothing more than a clear explanation of what was wrong. Others will reveal that they lack knowledge and will improve very quickly once they receive the right training. But some will change nothing. And that brings us to the decision that many practice owners postpone for far too long. Giving someone an opportunity to improve the working environment is not the same as endlessly tolerating an employee who continues to make the same mistakes. If you have clearly defined the problem, explained expectations, offered support, provided a realistic timeframe, and monitored the results, yet the same pattern continues, you have to start thinking about what is best for the practice and the rest of the team in the long term. Keeping one employee at any cost can cost you several of your best employees, who may eventually start thinking about changing their behavior or changing jobs. That is a calculation many people only understand when they receive a resignation from the person they least expected to lose. Why are you leaving? Is it about money? Did you get a better offer? And the answer is often not that simple. The problem may have been building for a year. Your best employees have been watching themselves constantly correct other people's mistakes. They have watched their reliability become the reason they are given more responsibilities. They have watched problematic behavior being tolerated because no one wants to have an uncomfortable conversation. And gradually, they come to the conclusion that nothing is going to change. There is another thing practice owners often underestimate: recognizing a good employee as someone who is valuable, reliable, and honest. Reliable people can become almost invisible. They are not late. They do not create drama. They do not constantly ask for help. They do not demand attention. Because of that, a manager can easily begin to treat their performance as normal and expected. Most of the manager's time is then spent dealing with problematic employees, while the best employees receive less attention and more work. That is a dangerous combination. A good employee does not expect praise for every task, but they do want to know that their contribution is noticed and that high standards are genuinely valued. That is why feedback should not exist only when something goes wrong. When someone does a good job, tell them. When you notice professionalism, reliability, or an excellent relationship with patients, do not assume the person already knows that you appreciate it. Say it. In the end, the quality of a dental team is not determined only by the professional competence of individual team members. It is determined by the standards the practice applies every day. If responsibilities are clear, problems are addressed openly, people are respected, and the same standards apply to everyone, a good employee has a reason to stay. If your best people are constantly correcting the mistakes of weaker employees while management tries to avoid conflict, then the system is effectively punishing the very people it should be trying hardest to retain. So when you think about an employee who is not meeting expectations, do not ask only, "How can I improve this person's performance?" Ask the much more important question. What is my tolerance of this problem doing to the best people on my team? Because the first person to leave may not be the one who is late, creates problems, or avoids responsibility. It may be the person who has arrived first for years, finished the job without being asked, and quietly carried the practice on their shoulders. And when that person finally says they want to talk, they may no longer be asking for something to change. They may simply be telling you that they are leaving,